What's up, you guys? I'm Dan. This is Frugal Not Cheap, and today we'll investigate whether the FIRE movement has gotten a little bit chubby. So quickly, in case you don't know, the FIRE, Financial Independence Retire Early movement, is the idea that we could save very aggressively, investing very aggressively for a short period of time in order to then have financial freedom for the rest of our lives. Of course, this is much easier, say, if you have a high income or if you have a very low spending as well. As the wider that gap is, the more you're able to save, and also the less you need to save for in order to fund your retirement, because your expenses are lower. Now, this is not, some super new concept. There's been, I'm sure ideas about being financially independent for forever. But even with some of the more modern iterations of it, you've got in 1992 a book that was published by Vicki Robin and Joe Dominguez. This is called Your Money or Your Life, and it talked about how people could achieve financial independence. Back then, bond yields were really strong, and so that was one option. But of course, the specific investment strategy wasn't really the important part. It was just the idea that we could actually find a way to save enough and invest enough in order to be financially independent. Now, personally, I discovered FIRE in 2013 or 2014 through a blog called Mr. Money Mustache. And actually, Mr. Money Mustache, Pete Adney, happens to be the guy that wrote the foreword for a recent edition of Your Money or Your Life. So here's Mr. Money Mustache. He put out, his first blog post back in the spring of 2011. And of course, Mr. Money Mustache is a little bit of like an alternate ego or a character who's, really into super frugality, kind of a Renaissance man, does everything himself, is very much against being what he calls a consumer sucker, kind of like a everyday person that just goes around spending willy-nilly. So it's a really fun persona and makes the blog post really interesting to read. But the main thing, of course, is here's a guy that retired at the age of 30 with a paid-off house and enough investments in order to fund his lifestyle, which was for a family of three, about $27,000 a year. I've got a whole video actually where I talk about how I discovered FIRE and kind of my journey with that. You can check that out. But the short version is that I became interested in personal finance blogs all the way back in around 2006 when I was a nonprofit credit counselor. And then I continued reading them during my graduate coursework in economics between 2007 and 2008, and then also into 2009. So you can imagine that was a very exciting time to be studying economics. If you're wondering why, that was when the Great Recession happened, the collapse of Lehman Brothers, and also Bear Stearns, and then the fallout that we had in the economy and the real estate market and all that stuff. Anyway, so Mr. Money Mustache started writing his stuff in 2011, as we said, but I didn't find it until around 2013 or 2014. I'd always known how to save. I was capable of putting together some savings, but I didn't really have a goal, something that I was going to do with those savings. So I would kind of save and then blow it, save and then blow it, and that was kind of it. But now, discovering Mr. Money Mustache and the idea of FIRE, then I had something to start to save and invest towards. I'd also always been relatively frugal, keeping my spending down pretty low. And that was another way that Mr. Money Mustache's message really agreed with me as well. So here we can look at his budget. These are annual expenses. So he's got $3,600 for his mortgage. We've got $6,700 for his child's education. We've got $4,000 for travel, over $4,000 for travel. So, this is not some super bare bones existence. They are enjoying life. Groceries at $3,900. Miscellaneous stuff at $2,400, apparently including a digital camera, swimming classes for their son, clothing, and all that kind of stuff. We got utilities at $1,260. Health and fitness at about $1,100. This is a CrossFit gym for his wife. Gas at about $800. Insurance at $700, restaurants at $500, and even charitable donations at $374. Then we got some other little stuff, and it all comes out to $30,500. If we exclude the mortgage, then that's where we get that $27,000 number. So really, I think it's more fair to say that it's spending of $30,500 that he had for a family of three back in 2011, and so that's pretty good. We're talking about $10,000 per person. Even that, though, is a bit spendy compared to kind of some early earlier stuff that was going on in the FIRE movement, where we've got Jacob Lundfisker, who published a book called Early Retirement Extreme. Actually, before Mr. Money Mustache started blogging, he put out his book in September of 2010. And he was able to retire at the age of 33 with just $175,000, spending about $7,000 per person. It was him and one other. Now, that did rise over time, so I think that was kind of, initially it was $14,000 for two people. By 2008, his budget had risen to about $1,900 a month, or just under $23,000 a year. So still though, we're talking about $11,500 per person, and really most of that expense was rent, which was $1,400 a month. So this is pretty extreme, and you can imagine, both of these blogs coming out in the kind of the wake of the Great Recession, that being frugal and really being, careful with your funds was a lot more popular then. But since that time, we've had really, a very strong stock market. We also have a very, very tight labor market. The company that I work at, we were just hiring, and man, very different caliber of candidates at the salary level than we were used to seeing before. It's a very different labor market. And we've seen that kind of reflected in the FIRE movement over time. So back in 2014, when I joined the Mr. Money Mustache forums, one of the threads that really caught my eye and I thought was fun was, do you look poor to people? So this poster, Mom to 5, is asking, do you come across as poor to people around you? Saying that, she was using cloth diapers and people were giving her disposable diapers as gifts because they thought she couldn't afford them. Also, by having a small wardrobe, people thought she just couldn't afford clothes. And then a family member thought that, because she was trying to be careful about her electricity spending, in terms of the heating and cooling, that she was in financial trouble and needed assistance. So obviously this is the case. This person was just, being frugal and trying to be careful with resources. And, I would say that I don't think it's good to give people the impression that you need assistance, especially if they then actually go out and do things for you that are charitable, that they wouldn't do if they knew what the situation really was. So personally, I don't try to come off that way. I try to find a way to come off as if I'm doing just fine, while at the same time not going out and being very, very spendy. And I think I'm succeeding. I don't know, you can ask my friends. In any case, these Mr. Money Mustache forums and really the movement in general, as the stock market kind of continued to rally and the economy continued to grow, and as also the popularity of the FIRE idea spread, then of course it got watered down to some degree. It became more mainstream. And as you can imagine, some of the kind of old school people started to complain about it. So here's a post by Psionic, I don't know how to pronounce that, but really basically saying that they're going to quit the forums because what they're seeing now is not anywhere being recognizable. So he ends his post by saying, "Consumers suck essential is what I see over and over. Cars broken, well, there are deals on new cars, you deserve it. Consumer electronics, life, spending, the place is just mainline now." And I definitely can agree with seeing that experience on the Mr. Money Mustache forums as well. And then we even started to give names to these kind of less aggressive versions of FIRE. I've got a video called The Different Levels of FIRE. And here, basically, you get the idea of lean FIRE, which is probably more like what early retirement extreme would be like, those really, really low budgets. Then kind of regular FIRE, sort of Mr. Money Mustache level of spending. And then you have fat FIRE, and then there's even obese FIRE. I don't know. Anyway, just higher and higher levels of spending. And so the financial independence component remains the same, but really the approach to frugality and consumerism is very, very different amongst these levels. So certainly just the fact that we invented these terms, and you can see the trends in the forums, that the FIRE movement has gotten a little bit chubby. A good example of that, and why I actually chose to make this video today, is that I'd recently seen two things. One was the 500th episode of Paula Pant's Afford Anything podcast. She did this with Brad Barrett of Choose live in Brooklyn. And they were talking about, how well the market has gotten, and kind of reflecting back on how they've really loosened up in terms of their view on being hyper frugal as well over that time. Not only them, but also Brandon from Mad Fientist. His latest post was really not even content that he made himself. It was an interview that Chris Hutchins did on his podcast with a guy named Bill Perkins, who wrote a book called Die with Zero. And so you can imagine Die with Zero meaning zero money would be very different. Well, not necessarily very different, but anyway, certainly the philosophy is different from FIRE. He's talking about, maximizing sort of spending on enjoyment or fulfillment throughout the life cycle, and understanding that, of course, some things you can do at age 40 or 50 that you're not going to be able to do or enjoy when you're in your 70s or 80s, that kind of thing. So I'll probably do a review of the book Die with Zero at some point. So right now I haven't read the book, and all I know is what I heard Bill Perkins say during this interview, which is about an hour long. And in short, I would say that to some degree, Bill and the podcast hosts are equating spending with fulfillment. Now, there's nuance to that. They're obviously talking about different experiences and spending on particular things that bring fulfillment. But I would say that even that tighter version of it is still a premise that I would reject, because true joy and happiness can be found in a lot of things that really don't require any spending at all. And in some cases, when we think about consuming and spending, generally a lot of these things are for entertainment and comfort, where really a lot of the true fulfillment in life can be had with struggle and adversity, oddly enough. So, doing difficult things and accomplishing difficult things, actually. And then, of course, friends and family and the kinds of things that you need to do with them might not really require a lot of money in order to build some really powerful memories as well. In fact, there was another podcast I was listening to recently, and I can't remember who it was or what it was, but the guy had done a lot of research on kind of happiness and what brings happiness. And the things that the research had shown were kind of like the top ones was like living near a body of water. That apparently brings a lot of happiness. Of course, a romantic relationship brings a lot of happiness, and that doesn't necessarily have to be expensive, especially the activities that he was talking about doing with a romantic partner that bring a lot of happiness. Those are not expensive, so yeah. But that's not to say that I completely disagree with the Die with Zero approach. I think one of the important points that he made was that you could, in his critique of FIRE, could be that you could be so hyper-focused on frugality and achieving a certain net worth that you might miss out on enjoying the journey. And I 100% agree with that we should not do that. That would be a major mistake. I think that we should absolutely enjoy the journey towards financial independence, and that really by learning how to enjoy that journey, we're also building up the muscles that we need in order to enjoy our early retirement as well, the RE portion of FIRE, F-I-R-E. So to sum up again, I definitely do think that the FIRE movement has gotten chubby. But we as individuals don't have to if we don't choose to. When I FIRE, my budget should still be relatively lean, you'll see. But at the same time, it isn't all about just the destination. I 100% agree with the idea that we should be enjoying the journey towards FIRE. And if you're on that journey, I hope that you are too. So there you go. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you liked the video. If you did, please hit the like button and consider subscribing. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.